some songs that just get you, the way that a great book gets you or a great movie gets you. And this is one of those songs for me. Whenever I hear it. So it's one of those songs where I listen to the words. And there's a lot of people that I've spoken to, and they say, oh, I'm not really a lyrics person. I like to hear how the music sounds. And fair enough. But this is one where I get so distracted by how good the vocals are, the lyrics, that I really can't even hear the guitar. So I really had to sit down with this one and just disconnect from the words, which, you know, had pluses and minuses to that this is a song that very deeply affects me. So let's get right into the lyrics. The first verse talks about clouds, and to me that's kind of why I put it in the same category as almost like a Shel Silverstein story, because it's a lot of that schoolyard imagery. It starts off with rows and flows of angel hair. I'm looking out the window right now at some clouds. Almost think of like a Michelangelo ceiling or something with all the, you know, flowing, you know, drapery and beards and hair and all that. And then the next piece, again, ice cream castles, you know, huge turrets and, you know, moats, drawbridge, all made out of ice cream. And then the last line, feather canyons everywhere. So it's just basically putting you in this big, like, plush, imaginary landscape. And then here comes the landing. And I looked at clouds that way. And now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. All the things that I would have done, but clouds got in my way. Closing that piece, it's only cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. And it's like this point of wisdom. It kind of encapsulates all of the hardest parts of your kid soul growing up. And I can't believe how succinctly she does that. And that's kind of what devastates me when I listen to it. And I just say, the white flag goes up and I go, okay, I surrender, you know? It's beautiful. To have written this as a young person and to hear her young, you know, like dove-like voice singing this, and then to hear her now, or even go back 20-something years to when she did her re-recording of it, hearing her older self address this song, it hits differently. To write a song from both sides when she was only on that one side, kind of that leading edge, a transfer of being young and idealistic to being a little more stoic, and she ended up having some really harsh life experiences of, you know, moving to a city, falling in love, or having a baby, having a marriage, and then having that kind of disintegrate, and then having her give up her baby for adoption, not knowing that about 3 years later she'd be living the life of a rock star, basically. And so there's a lot of pain in that. There's a lot of not knowing, a lot of the inability of being on both sides and making really hard decisions. And she really was an adventurer, and she had that kind of restless spirit where she was constantly traveling to new places, falling in love with a place, falling in love with new people, and having that both sides experience where she would say, all right, this is done. You know, build a band, tear the band down, or build a band up and dive into something totally brand new, and then eventually come back around full circle. She really is investing her music and her songs with her life. To me, it's not in an ego way, it's in a way where she's just being brutally honest, and then probably putting artwork out there that other people can mirror and put their feelings into. The clouds image, I think, you know, I remember reading, was inspired by a writer who had you know, traveled by plane, and there was some kind of reference to the idea of being able to see clouds from above on the ground, clouds from below in the air. And that's where I got my thumbnail for this episode, was from my wife. Took my boys down to North Carolina. She sent me this beautiful picture, not knowing that this was going to be the next song that I did. And you can see that it really was a both sides moment, which I thought was beautiful. That's my take on the lyrics. Gorgeous, stunning. Let's check out the music side of it. Here's your tuning rundown for the first version, which is the album version by Joni. So you got a D, an A, another D. Okay, so those are, already you've got kind of like a fifth chord there. Add to it the third note to make the triad, F sharp, give or take. The B is tuned down to an A, and then the other E string is also a D. D's, A's, and one F sharp. So it's kind of dominated by that almost power chordy sound, but beautiful and resonant. Then we're taking that and we're going to capo it up on the 4th. Now you get that signature sound of the song. The cool part about open tunings is you have to kind of throw out the window a lot of your old shapes. The one shape is going to look like this. If I can put that in the middle of the screen there. And basically what you got going on there is you got middle finger, I'm going to call this the E7 grip, because it looks just like an E7 chord in standard tuning. The way to make that grip is middle on the 2nd fret, in this case where it's going to start, of the A string, and then you're going to skip a string, and then your pointer is going to go on the 1st fret of the G string. And so it gives you this sound. And that first row means I'm either going to be here, starting at the 4th fret above the capo, or I'm here, starting at the 2nd fret above the capo. And so I'll let you kind of play around with that, hear what that open setting sounds like, hear what it sounds like when you grip the 4th, the 2nd, and then open again. Okay? So that's a lot of the chords in this song. And the other thing that's going to happen is the other row that you're going to live in is starting on the D string. And so instead of having a gap between the 2 strings, the middle finger just drops down, and then it creates like this, what they call a major 3rd grip, I guess you would call that. And then that you can accompany with a ring finger on the high E string, and that gives that pretty chimey high note, okay? And here you're either same 4th fret home or 2nd fret home or open. And so just a quick look at what that equates to. Open, E7 grip, and then when you're ready to get into the verse, 4th fret in that E7 grip, 2nd fret, and then. And there's a little nuance to it, you know, there's a little bit of a, you know, the grip hammering on and off, there's different things you can do with that, but just understanding where those home bases are, it's going to help you decode it. So you can kind of do some of your own, you know, ear training through there. The first time that it walks down, and then it stays for the 2nd time. So that's doing that higher row. Walk down again, E7 on the grip on the 4th fret, and then 2, and then landing on that. Kind of feels almost like a C9 grip, that 2nd row on the 2nd fret, and then does that one more time, that same walk down. Now watch this little lick. Okay, A string, 3, 2, open, 3 on the E string, and then right back to that. Last little detail, and then here's the big. And I'm going to play all of these, and I roll up a little bit to get the real chimes. Do what you feel, almost like the way if you sat at a harp for the first time and you were just kind of like, you know, that's the deal. Okay, that's version 1. So going all the way back to the original Joni version to his version, there is a both sides now, sort of a feeling there. To tune this one, it's going to be in open G. So traditionally, I think open G has this first string as a D. We're dropping it all the way down to a B. So it's very low, all right? Then the A string is dropped to a G. D and G stays the same as usual, as does the B. And then this high E is dropped down to a D. And you can match that. Once you're in a spot where you have that tuning correct, and then you're gonna capo it up to the 2nd fret, where it becomes open A. Here it goes. First chord, and I'll put the shapes here. First chord is open, with just the capo, and that creates an A major. The second chord is going to look like a G major shape, except it's slided up here to the, what is the 5th fret above the capo. That's your F sharp. Okay. Then it slides down to this. Love that sound. All right, and that's going to be your thumb is covering this note, and then these two fingers are kind of making an A minor 7 shape, and then this completes the bass note. All right, so now you have that D chord, then this B minor, which is shaped just like an E minor, and then it goes back to that chord, and then up to again that kind of G major shape, except instead of putting my fretting the E string, I'm fretting the B string there, and leaving that wild and free note in the background there. And there it is. So those are all the chords. The one other spot you're going to see when it walks up in the chorus, it momentarily moves up to this A minor shape. Okay, and that's going to be, you know, rooted up on the 4th fret above the capo. And then it makes this one again. And you'll see that in context coming up right now. So watch for these shapes to change. If you're doing it exact, there's a pretty little melody there. For the purposes of singing along, I'm going to simplify it to be just the chords so you can see them. So here goes.
Love that way. Now it's just another show. You're even laughing when you go, and if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. I looked at love from both sides now. Still somehow it's love's illusions that I recall. I really don't know love.
Check out the rest of Joni's catalog. Special highlights for the Blue album as well as Hejira. Check them all out, including Clouds, which is the album that this one comes off of. Definitely support Dan Riverman too. Check out some of his other work. Hope you had fun. See you on the next one.